welcome to the Thursday episode of the 905er and this week's 905 Roundup. My name is Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And, well, we have a couple of stories, as always, on a Thursday. And, well, the first one, Joel, is certainly, if you live in Burlington, this has been the main topic of discussion, and it's not the municipal election, although it has bearing possibly on the municipal election. But it's a different kind of a beast of a different color, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it.
A furrier one. If you longtime listeners of this podcast will know that we've mentioned this a couple episodes ago. So I guess you don't have to be that long of a listener. But coyotes in Burlington have been the main news, main concern in Burlington for the last. If you read the papers, you're going to think, oh, it's only been an issue for the last couple of months. In reality, you and I both know this has been going on for years, almost close to a decade now, I think, of concerns about wild coyotes in urban neighborhoods here in Burlington, and I'm sure other neighborhoods in the 905 as well. This isn't just a Burlington problem, but it's ballooned up because these coyotes have, long story short, basically attacked people minding their own business who were not pestering these coyotes, who were not bothering them, but the coyotes are so desensitized to humans that they feel comfortable going right up to people as they sleep and start biting them, either wanting to eat them or to demand a food from them. Basically, it's been, these coyotes are so used to humans that we no longer really pose a threat to them. They're not afraid of us anymore. And we've mentioned this all this before, and I know listeners are probably saying, what's the point, Joel? Get to the point. And the point is this: there's a website called Coyote Watch Canada.com. We're going to post a link to this particular article in our show notes. But on September 21st, they wrote in a blog titled "Wildlife Encounters Are Preventable If Timely Action is Taken." I'm not going to read it word for word, but the gist is this. I'm going to quote this. As far back as 2014, Coyote Watch Canada contacted the City of Burlington about issues related to wildlife feeding, attractants, and preventing negative encounters for residents. Hundreds of field investigation and mitigation hours exposed multi-site wildlife feeding, but the city took no action to resolve these locations. Many of these locations are still hotspots today. Flash forward to later on in the blog post, in a 2018 letter to council, it was noted that squirrels, chipmunks, waterfowl, and other animals, all of whom typically keep their distance from humans, were following residents in parks. That this behavior was also taught to coyotes is of no surprise, and was entirely preventable. Basically, they're saying that this not-for-profit agency that is granted concerned with conservation efforts for coyote wildlife, basically saying, like, you need to address this. Like, bad things are going to happen if you do not properly educate people now on how to live with coyotes. And right now, for Burlington, the city of Burlington has said they've killed 4 coyotes to date. The problem is always that we were told at the start, like, there's no point in killing a coyote because another coyote will just move in and take that coyote's habitat. So this idea, oh, the city's doing something, they've been forced to kill these coyotes. Have we solved the ultimate problem? I'm going to say no, because my suspicion is another coyote is going to move into those 4 coyotes' habitats, and we're going to be right back where we started on this problem, folks.
Back where we started, or even worse. I mean, again with this website, it seems to me, we haven't spoken to the authors of the website, but it seems to me to be written by people who are pretty darn well informed. It's well written. It's not inflammatory. It doesn't strike me as written by people who are willing to let to not let facts get in the way of their agenda, if you see what I mean. It seems to be a well informed, well written thing. I don't know if that means it's accurate or not, but it certainly struck us as, well, this is very interesting. And actually, the thing I found really interesting is who and what they don't blame. because those are the things that the city's been blaming and kind of shaming tacitly or not so tacitly last few years, which is, basically, oh, well, the citizens aren't putting out their garbage in the right way or at the right times, bird feeders and back gardens, things like this. There's no mention of that. They're talking about feeding in parks, and specifically a presumably small number of people in the city who actually feed the coyotes. These are things which are obviously it's not the city's fault that there are people who do things like that, but it is the city's fault that there isn't better education and enforcement surrounding not feeding wildlife. When I was a kid, I used to throw bread for the ducks. I didn't know there was anything wrong with that, but there are wildlife experts will tell you that actually that's a pretty terrible thing to do. It doesn't do them any favors. There are signs in LaSalle Park saying don't feed the ducks, but unless there's enforcement, and also not just enforcement, but explanation to people about why you don't want to be feeding the ducks or the geese or the whatever, people aren't going to pay any attention because they're like, well, we've always fed the geese. What the hell is the problem? We all know that kind of reaction. We all feel it ourselves in our guts when we hear something we've done for a long time is challenged. A natural reaction is to say, oh, leave me alone. But if there are good arguments, and if the end result of this kind of behavior is people getting bitten by coyotes, then yeah, I'll listen and I'll change my behavior. Education's never been done in Burlington, so I thought the story that they're telling is substantially different from the story we get from the city. But ultimately, the parts about the city was the one that was saying shooting coyotes is a waste of time, and I'm sure they're right. It is a waste of time. Now they've been forced into a situation where they have to do it because the public is not going to accept much else. And because you've got a short-term crisis where, I think everybody assumed that, well, if the odd lapdog out for a nighttime pee gets eaten by a coyote, it's a shame, but what are you going to do? And I know I've spoken to people personally who that happened to, and I spoke to politicians about, well, this happened to, they're very upset. And literally the kind of reaction was an eye roll of, well, what do you expect if you let your dog out late at night? Well, not very sympathetic, but anyway. But we're in this situation now because they kind of shrugged and said, well, basically this is the public's fault. What are we going to do? We're just going to say that the public are morons, not in so many words, but basically quite a strong implication that the public are morons. They shouldn't do it. You're naughty. But if you don't change your behavior, this is what can happen. And that's like, well, that's a very negative view of what your role is as city enforcement. But of course, it costs money to do the things that would have needed to be done.
That's ultimately what it comes down to here is that you to educate the public, change their behavior, and get them on board. It's going to require money and a campaign and strong messaging, and that requires time and resources. And it's very clear the city just said, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. It's somebody else's problem. Forget it. And it's one of those things like, yeah, like you're going to discomfort some people. And it was almost as if the city was like, okay, do we discomfort the old busybodies who are going to call, like you said, I always am able to feed the ducks in the park. Why am I not able to feed the ducks anymore? You guys are crazy. And instead of taking on them and saying, no, like the problem is you train these animals to follow humans around. You're going to train coyotes to do the same. And they are a lot bigger than cute, fuzzy squirrels. And what it also would mean is eventually at some point, yeah, you might have to get police, bylaw officers to start issuing tickets and fines to people. Say, listen, you're feeding animals in a public park. Stop it. Here's your ticket, and make an example out of somebody. And that's what it would come down. And somebody said,